Hi guys, today's lesson is on the unitary method, which we've sort of covered already a fair bit, so it should be a relatively straightforward one. So the unitary method can be used where we don't have a simplified rate, and we might want to find out how that rate might apply to a different situation. So say for instance, in this case I've got Grace swatting 51 flies in 17 minutes. How many can she swat in 90 minutes? So we've got a rate there. It's not a simplified rate. I've got 51 flies in 71 minutes, but I can put those things as sort of being equal to each other. I can say, well, 51 flies are swatted in 17 minutes, so I can sort of represent that by way of an equation just here. Okay? So the unitary method is called the unitary method because you bring everything back to a single unit. So easier, if I find out how many flies she can swat in 1 minute, I can then multiply that out to find out how many flies she can swat in any number of minutes. So obviously the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to divide by 17. So if I divide by 17, that'll get me down to 1 minute. But of course, whatever I do to one side of my little equation I created, I've got to do the other. So I'll have to divide that side by 17. And that will give me this final little number here that she can swat 3 flies in 1 minute. Now, 3 flies per minute sounds like a simplified rate, and that's simple enough to move on with. But the question didn't say, can you put this as a simplified rate? It said, how many can she swat in 90 minutes? So, in other words, what we do is to find out how many she can swat in 90 minutes, I'm going to take that 1 minute and I'm going to multiply it by 90. But of course, whatever I do to one side, I've got to do the other, so I have to multiply the 3 flies on the other side by 90. So we do that, we end up with 270 flies equals 90 minutes. So in other words, Grace can swat 270 flies in 90 minutes. Okay, it's slightly a different way of dealing with rates. Obviously I've got some rather strange examples here. I must have been in a weird mood that day when I made these ones. But just to give it a further example, if 250 grams of unicorn droppings grows into 13 fluffy kittens, how many fluffy kittens would I get from 3 kilos of unicorn droppings? So the first thing I'll say is try to get the unicorn droppings and the fluffy kittens out of your mind and just deal with what's there. Okay, so we represent this as a little equation. So I know that 250 grams of unicorn droppings equals 13 kittens. Okay, so I know that if I've got 250 grams of unicorn droppings, I get 13 kittens. So that's why we've got the equal sign there. It's kind of a bit of a strange way of thinking about it, but that's okay. Right, so the next thing we're going to do is, okay, so we want to know what happens if I have 3 kilos of unicorn droppings. So, let's see how many kittens we'd get out of 1 gram of unicorn droppings, and then we can multiply up. So if I divide this by 250, I'm going to get 1 gram of unicorn droppings. So that'll tell me how many kittens I get out of that. Now this is going to be a strange number. And it doesn't honestly matter that this is going to be a decimal, but we're going to have to divide this by 250 as well. All right, so if we divide that by 250, I'll pull out my calculator. 13 divided by 250 gets me 0.052. So 1 gram of unicorn droppings will give me 0.052 of a kitten. But of course, that's not what we're after. We're not after a simplified rate. We're after how much we get out of 3 kilos. So to go from 1 gram up to 3 kilos, I would need to multiply that gram by 3,000. Okay? And that would get me 3 kilos of unicorn droppings. Which of course, if I do that to one side, I'm going to have to do that to the other. So I'm going to have to take that 0.052 and I'm going to have to multiply that by 3,000 as well. So if I pull up my calculator, I should still have that number still there, and I can just go multiplied by 3,000. And I get 156. Oops, wrong colour pen. Okay, and then because it's a problem question, I'm going to answer it with a sentence. If someone asks you a question in real life, you generally answer them with words and a sentence. So because it's a problem question, I should give them a sentence. I can say something along the lines of, you would get 156 fluffy kittens from 3 kilos of unicorn droppings. Now, obviously, I don't really like this example. I might remind myself to change this because I think probably it's a little bit too silly having unicorn droppings and fluffy kittens. But you can see how the same approach can be used if I'm talking about the amount of mortar I use to the amount of bricks I use, or the amount of fertilizer I use versus how much fruit I get. Okay, so yeah, it's a little bit of a strange example, but you can see the process is quite simple, and we've been used to this unitary method process in the past anyway. So exercise 1B, questions 3 to 13, have a go over as many of those as you can, particularly, as always, get up to those level 2 and level 3 questions. If you think you've got it, make sure you can apply it when the questions are a little bit less straightforward. And that'll do us for this lesson.